The opinions expressed on the Simone Edwards Show by our guests are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station, its owners, and or the Simone Edwards Show and those affiliated with it. In no event will the Simone Edwards Show, this station, its owners, guests, hosts, or affiliates be liable for the information disseminated on the program, including, without limitation, any loss or damage, indirect or otherwise, arising from information presented on the show. We trust you are of legal age and will consult appropriate professionals prior to employing any opinion expressed on the show. Many of the topics discussed are personal in nature, and some people may disagree with the opinions expressed on the show. We are open to your constructive criticism and or ideas for future radio programs. Please feel free to email us at the Simone Edwards Show @gmail.com. Again, that's the Simone Edwards Show @gmail.com. Hey everyone, we want to welcome you to another installment of the Simone Edwards Show here on the station. I am so excited. I actually feel like a rock star came to the studio today. It is my privilege and my pleasure to introduce to you a woman whose message has impacted my life for the better and so many other people that I know. So I want to introduce to some and present to others Miss Cynthia Burnham, author of The Charisma Edge, a how-to guide for turning on your leadership power. Cynthia, say hi to our audience.
Thank you. Oh, hello to everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
We are excited to have you here in studio with us. So before we jump into leadership charisma and executive presence and how to make a positive impact using neuroscience and how we were created and wired, let's get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a native La Mesa person. I was born and raised in La Mesa, California, but I have lived in a whole variety of different places.
Oh, wow.
And including Los Angeles, Memphis, Tennessee, Connecticut, France, New York, and a lot of different places. And I think that the key thing that I like people to know about me is that I look at the world as the opportunity to evaluate all the different ways that people can be in the world and how they can be happier and more successful in their lives.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that. You had me at France. I was going to say, what's your favorite place? But yeah, I'm stuck at France. What was it? Do you speak French?
I do speak French, yes.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. How long did you live?
I only lived in France for a year, but I've been back many, many times since then. And I was fortunate enough in part of my career when I was working on Wall Street to travel to Europe on a regular basis for work.
Oh,
how cool is that?
That is so cool. But here's what makes you so fascinating to me is you actually worked on Wall Street.
Yes.
So you have this to use, even though they say that the right brain, left brain thing is really defunct and it's not actual science anymore. But to use that for something that we can hone in on. You are very left brain in the fact that you were an executive coach and you worked on Wall Street,
yes.
But you were also this artistic musician, singer. So how did you meld the two? Where did the passion for all of that come in?
What a great question. I don't think I think it was accidental.
Right.
In that I started out thinking that I was going to be the great American novelist and I was going to be an anthropologist.
Okay.
And as happens with so many people that I run into, you think your career and your life is going to take you in a certain direction.
Right.
And then you have to make a living, you have to pay the bills. And I ended up taking a job in business and then going and getting a degree in business because I figured nobody was going to hire me unless I had that. But I retained all of the pieces of looking at the world as a scientist, but also looking at the world as an artist. As I said, I thought I was going to be a novelist. My mother is a painter.
Wow.
I grew up with crazy people in the household. So I never thought that they were mutually exclusive.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I always thought you had to have both parts of you in order to be happy. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
You really need the, for lack of a better word, left side to balance out the right side and vice versa. So anthropology.
Yes.
So what led you to anthropology?
everybody looks back on their life and they say, how did I get where I got? And I
Right.
can make up a story about it. So this is just one of the stories. And that is, when I was a little girl, I was in love with dinosaurs.
Okay.
Unlike many little children in the world who are
Right.
in love with, I mean, you see it all the time. And as I got older, I found that I could investigate the past and humans.
Right.
So I started studying Paleolithic anthropology and cultural anthropology. I didn't
Wow.
think we were going to talk about this. This is very strange to think about. Yeah, and I ended up looking at everything in the world through that focus. Is that what is a different culture? How does it create people to become different? How does it make people within one area act differently than people in another area, or they grew up in one place or another place? And then I started looking at the business world as a culture.
Oh, I love that. You answered my next question. I was going to ask you, how did that background
Yes.
segue into business and now your work as an executive coach and a leadership consultant?
Well, I think of myself secretly as an anthropologist,
Okay.
in that what I do is I go in and I look at what works well in this culture, because every culture has a different set of rules.
Right.
And every business is its own culture.
Right.
And if you go in and think you can just be as you were in the school culture,
Right.
and that's going to work for you in the business culture, then you're going to have some catching up to do, generally speaking, because they're so different.
Right.
I mean, I was a stranger in a strange land when I went into the business world. I didn't think I needed to have a suit. This is 1977. I went to
Okay.
work for Gillette Safety Razor, which is, you want to talk about a male-oriented company, right? There were no women, and I had one extra earring in my ear, and I would come in with pants that were tied at the bottom and hippie clothes, and my boss didn't know what to do with me. And then little by little, I said, well, this doesn't work here.
Right.
And how do I say who I am and believing in myself and what I care about? And if I have to change what I wear or some of the language that I use, I just look at it as I'm going to France. You know,
I absolutely love what you're saying, though, because it's applicable in so
Yes.
many areas of our lives. Because so often, even in speaking out of it from a spiritual sense, so often we can come into, a spiritual setting. We can come into the church and we can bring our old ideologies or our old ways of thinking
Yes.
and have this like dogmatic stance of, well, I'm not going to change and I'm going to stay But it's kind of like, well, what works for the culture
Yes.
that you're in, and finding out what works, because if you can tap into what works in that culture, then you'll find that current that you'll need to take you to where you need to go.
yes. So the example I give, and I see it most often with women, and especially young women, and so I do a lot of work with women.
Okay.
Is that I say to them, yeah, you're walking into the business world. It is a classic, old-fashioned, male-oriented world still. And if you go in and think that you can walk in and just be how you are with your girlfriends, that may not work for you, because the question becomes, if I told you were going to take a job in France, what would you first learn to do?
Right. Speak.
Speak
Right.
French. And is it more or less likely that the people in France are going to understand you if you speak French?
That's so good.
So the same thing is true for anyone going into a different culture, is what's the language here? It doesn't mean I'm any less who I am. I'm just
Right.
speaking a different language that those people can understand better than the one that I might be using if I was just hanging out with my girlfriends. So,
Right.
Yeah.
I love that is such an excellent principle, and I love the fact that it's so far reaching and so wide, because so wide in its application, because you can succeed in so many different avenues in life if you learn to do that.
Yes. And it doesn't, for me, it doesn't require changing my moral stance.
Right.
I'm not any less who I am. It's just I'm speaking myself in a different language.
Right.
And that has worked for me, and I think that's probably the thing that made me successful more than anything else.
Right. Oh my gosh, Cynthia, I absolutely love that so much. So this migration that you took from Gillette and some other companies that you worked for along the way, and you ended up
Duracell.
Duracell, and then you ended up on Wall Street.
Yes.
How did you go from Wall Street, in my favorite city in the world?
And mine, yes. New York City, yes.
How did you go from Wall Street to becoming an executive coach and a leadership consultant? How did that happen?
Well, it's a little more complicated than a quick answer, so bear with me.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that in actuality, I went through 2 midlife crises.
Okay.
Actually, 3 probably, if I really look at it. One was when I was working in the consumer packaged goods world in Duracell and Gillette. I decided that I could no longer be part of that situation for a lot of reasons that have to do with, frankly, how they were treating women in the organizations that I was part of and what I wanted to do with my life. And so I went out on my own as an independent trainer.
Okay.
Because what had happened is I had ended up running the sales training department. And so I went from there to becoming an independent trainer. And I stumbled into becoming an executive coach.
Wow.
Because there weren't any executive coaches when I started. And they were called one-on-one coaches. I was like a leadership tutor. I mean, they had all these weird words that they described it as back in the 90s. And I ended up doing work for a lot of major Wall Street firms for their leaders, doing this one-on-one training. And eventually they said, well, you're an executive coach. And I said, no kidding. Who knew? Isn't that funny? And I did a lot of work for companies, as I said, on Wall Street. And then eventually one of my clients for whom I had been doing a lot of work said, I'm sick of paying your blanking per diem. Would you come to work for me full time? And so I went into an internal position to run a conflict management department and do some other things.
Wow.
And then little by little, I got more and more and more. And then I had one of those midlife crises, and I decided it was time to move back to California. So,
oh my goodness, that is so amazing, though, that you've just had this really serendipitous life where opportunities you were granted, and you took advantage of the opportunities given to you, and you created your niche, and you created what you needed, even if the right terminology wasn't there.
Right.
It was rather than, I didn't want to stay in this particular field because I didn't agree with what they were doing morally or ethically, and so I want to segue into something else. And then you took the opportunity that was presented and created your own way and a job for yourself. So I absolutely love that.
Can I tell you a story? Because I think you may like this as a way of thinking about the world. When I was on Wall Street, I ended up with a very, very large scope of responsibility that was way larger than I wanted. Basically, I did what a lot of, frankly, women do, is they say yes to everything, and I took all the jobs. So I ended up with 4 jobs.
Wow.
And in fact, they split my job into 3 jobs when I left. So that tells you I'm not lying, at least about that, right? And I had come back from a personal spiritual retreat, and I was standing on the corner of 79th Street and Broadway in New York, and I had this thought that if I didn't stop what I was going to doing, I would die.
Wow.
Because I felt it was physically damaging me. And I thought, but if I left New York, where would I go?
Right.
And I thought, well, I always thought I would move home to San Diego when my mother became compromised.
Right.
And a voice came into my head which said, you can move home now.
I'm so done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one more piece if we have...
Absolutely.
Right?
No.
So I thought, oh my gosh, I can move home now. And so I did a lot of walking. It was July 4th weekend. I did a lot of walking that weekend, and I was walking up the street, also on Broadway, and there were 2 guys having an argument on the street. One guy was this little skinny white guy with cowboy clothes on and a gigantic foam cowboy hat. I mean, he was maybe 5'6" with this gigantic foam cowboy hat, right?
Right.
And he's talking to this other guy who's got a beard and is all dressed in like white linen clothes, and has got necklaces around his neck that have a cross and a Star of David and all these other things. And he's holding a book which has Hebrew writing on it, and they're screaming at each other. Right? Wow. They're screaming at each other, arguing who knows what. And I laughed and I said, oh my gosh, only in New York, only in New York. I love this city so much. And as I thought that, this is God's honest truth.
Right.
2 women walked by me, having nothing to do with, they were having their own conversation. And one woman said to the other woman, oh, I don't know, San Diego isn't so bad either.
Wow.
So you can see I have to be slapped side of the head, right? I
Right.
can't make my own decision. I have to these things have to come. And from that point I decided I would come back here to San Diego and go back into independent consulting and leadership development and doing all of that sort of thing.
That is an amazing story.
Yeah,
and it's
true.
You are the second person who's told me that. I actually have another woman that I know, and she had gotten into an accident, and she was really worried because at the time she had very young children, and she was just like, God, what's going to happen to me? And she heard a voice said, don't worry about it. It's not your time. And it's just in those moments. So for anyone who's listening who may have had that moment where you hear that very clear voice speak to you, that is the God who created you, and the Lord Jesus is speaking to you, and he's letting you know whether it's to go home to San Diego or to not worry about the accident that you're in because your kids are going to be okay. That is God speaking to you. Cynthia, I absolutely love your story so much. You guys will be back in just a moment. We have to take a break for station identification. When we come back, we're going to find out about leadership charisma and how to use that, and what leadership charisma really is. And so we're going to take it out of the spiritual use and we're going to bring it into a secular use and find out how we can use it to become better leaders and make a greater impact in the world around us. Hang tight. We'll be back in just a moment.
Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's show? Would you like to share your testimony or any constructive critiques? Would you like to know how to be a guest on The Simone Edwards Show? Please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. We are also available on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Be sure to follow us to receive updates regarding the show and our other ministries.
All right, we are back here in studio with Cynthia Burnham, author of The Charisma Edge, a how-to guide for turning on your leadership power. So, Cynthia, I want you to clarify the use and meaning of charisma for us. Give us a perspective that is outside of the spiritual context that it's used in.
Yes, I know that many times people think of charisma as the gifts, divine gifts that are given.
Right.
And there is some small piece of that I do think applies.
Right.
But generally speaking, when I talk about charisma, I talk about people who are able to make an immediate and powerful connection with the people around them. Mm-hmm. If people are charismatic, they feel connected to you and you feel connected to them. And it's really about that sort of sense of you're both being on the same wavelength. Right. And people who are charismatic are able to take that out to larger audiences as well.
Oh, I absolutely love that. So then, is charisma a skill that can be taught? Is it something that, isn't it something you're born with?
That is the question that I get asked more than any other question, is that aren't people just born charismatic? And the answer, I believe, to that is yes and.
Okay.
The yes part is the fact that I believe there are some people who are simply come into the world, sort of, ta-da, they're just, as babies, they're big, right? I've had the good fortune of meeting Bill Clinton. I've met Rudy Giuliani. I've met a number of people who were true, Hillary Clinton, people who I believe were truly charismatic from the day they were born.
Right.
Most of the rest of us are not so lucky. And so I believe that it is both. It's like any gift. It's like a musical gift. If you're a singer, you're probably going to need some training. Even if you have a great voice, you're still going to need some training in order to use that.
Right.
If you're a runner, you're never going to win it. You might come into the world with a body type that makes you a great runner. Right. But if you don't train and if you don't learn your skill, you're never going to win any Olympic medals. Right. So the same is true for charisma. I think that all of us have the ability to be so much bigger than we are now. We close ourselves in, we get in our own way.
What are some of the ways that we get in our own way?
That's a great question. There are so many ways. The biggest way that we get in our own way is that we do there are two things. First of all, we don't keep our still center. We allow ourselves to be jostled off a sense of inner balance that says, I'm in the right place at the right time. This is the right place for me, whatever it is. So we get thrown off. And the other way is that we spend so much time. I compare it to people walking around with boxes on their head.
Okay.
So it's like everybody's walking around with a box on their head, and the inside the box are mirrors. And so all you're seeing is your own reflection, and you're hearing your own stuff, and you're not paying any attention to what's going on in the outer world.
That's so good.
And it's like it circles back around to you, and you start judging yourself. You start thinking about all the ways that you are not enough, or that you could be doing better, and you get out of the moment. And if you look at linguistically, right, present and presence are the same root in English, at least.
Right.
And the people who are the most charismatic are the people who are 100% present to the other people in that moment.
So that means one of the skill sets in developing charisma is learning to be present.
Yes.
So it's not living in the past and rehearsing past mistakes, past failures, even past victories.
Yes.
And it's not projecting into the future, but it's just being in that moment.
That's right.
And simply being present in today. I'm not thinking about yesterday. I can do nothing about it. I'm not thinking about tomorrow. It's not here. The only thing, to use us as an example, the only thing I'm concerned about at this particular moment is my conversation with you.
Yes.
And that's the way that we can increase our charisma.
Yes. 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 And what happens is that people who don't do that, the metaphor that I would use is it's like your energy is getting sprayed out through a sprinkler. Because it's got like this blockage of all these little holes that are sending it in all these different directions.
Right.
But if you're fully present, you're like a fire hose.
Oh, I love that.
So, so if you're fully there for the people who are in the room with you or on the radio with you, then that's going to come across because your energy is going to be totally committed to whatever it is that you're doing.
Oh, I absolutely love that.
Oh, great.
So then, what are the challenges for men and women, and how are they different when it comes to charisma?
There are so many. Well, first of all, there are a couple of pieces that men tend to be wired for a sense of hierarchy, that who's better than somebody else.
Right.
And they tend to be focused on one thing at a time, where women tend to be, and this is partial hardwiring of the brain.
Right.
Women tend to be wired to be networkers, people who look for a sense of being equal to the people around them. Like if you said, "Oh, what a cute jacket," I'd say, "Oh, I got it, $29 at Marshall's." You know,
Right.
so I would pull back away from my own power.
Right.
So women have a very hard time having that sense of connection, especially with the women around them, and also being powerful, because it makes me somehow better than you if I'm not careful. And we are not good at bragging about ourselves.
Right.
We are not good at speaking with our own joy and our own voice. We say things like, instead of saying, "I'm so proud of you all," my leaders will say, "Oh, I know everybody has people they have that has worked for them that have done terrific things, and that you're all proud of your people, and that you, Joe, did great with your people over there, and you, Susie, did great with your people over there, but I'm really proud of my people." Because they are so, women in particular, are so concerned with being inclusive that they don't know how to balance it with being direct and saying, "I am so proud of you," which is a very different message. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, what are some of the obstacles that women can overcome to own their own power, own their own voice, and know how to? Because I think one of the things that men do a little bit better than women is the ability to compartmentalize and to say, okay, no, when I'm in this role, this is the role that I'm in. And when I go home and I'm with my husband and children, or I go home and I'm with my family, or whatever the case may be, or when I'm with my friends, then I can tap into that inclusive part of me. But when I'm here, this is what I need to manage. How does a woman tap into that? And then we'll talk about the male side of it.
Well, one of the things that the most important thing is learning how to be present in that moment.
Right.
To say, what is being asked of me now?
Right.
And for me, if I'm fully present in the moment, and it's hard to do, then I'm not thinking about what's happening at home. I am automatically compartmentalizing.
Right.
I think that for women, we think we're supposed to think of everything at once, rather than saying, it's not the time right now. Right now I'm concentrating, I'm giving my full energy to this. And it's really about making a choice to give your full energy somewhere rather than to compartmentalize or do something else.
Okay. No, that's absolutely perfect.
Okay.
So it ties back into what we're talking about with being present.
Yes.
So what are some of the other challenges for women when it comes to charisma and this sense of not wanting to own their own power?
Yes. Well, we all know how we're programmed. We are
Right.
programmed in many ways. We are programmed. I call it people tend to lead with some piece of themselves.
Right.
They lead with the piece of themselves that's made them successful.
Right.
And I watch it with speakers when I coach speakers. Some people, men and women, they lead with being funny. Other people, they lead with being smart. That's I always lead with being smart.
Right.
Other people lead with being charming or being beautiful, because
Right.
those, or being attractive,
Right.
because those things have worked for them. And when you watch a speaker, you can see them do that. And so the question becomes, what do you want to lead with?
Okay. So then that's very interesting. So then in making the determination of what you want to lead with, and we're talking about both sides of the aisle, is that a matter of the room that you're in, or is that a matter of, or does it not matter? Does the audience matter, or does the audience not matter?
The audience matters a great deal.
Okay.
It's who do I want to be in this moment? Who is it appropriate for me to be in this moment? If I want to be a powerful business leader, then leading with cute and funky is probably not going to work.
Right.
For a man or for a woman.
That's really good.
Leading with funny is probably not going to work, but leading with being smart, powerful, and focused may work better for you.
I absolutely love that. So now you were talking about with men,
Yes.
and that men tend to be hierarchical, and it tends to be more of a competition and
Yes.
who's better than. So then what can our male listeners work towards in removing that element of, I guess, competition or one's upmanship, for lack of a better word?
And that's a great question, and I see it with men. Sometimes what men tend to do is they tend to what I call posture.
Okay.
And it's like they think they have to swagger in some way. And I just say, be still, be simple, be focused, and your job is to connect with the people. And if you think of everything about your job as being, your job is to connect, to connect, to connect, to connect, then you'll back away from, men or women, you'll back away from some of those, I got to compete with that guy because he doesn't have my back, or I'm going to make sure I'm smarter than that guy. If you think my job is that my message has to connect with you and you and you and you, then I think you're going to come at it in a different way.
I like that. I really like that a lot. So for women, it's more of, in a generalized sense, for women, if as a woman you find yourself in that pulling back and pulling away from your power, it's really about learning to be present in that moment, to be grounded, and to speak clearly and to deliver the facts depending on the room.
Yes.
So if you are in a business setting, this is not the time to be cute or charming. This is
Or it may not be. It
may not be.
Yeah.
This is the time to be decisive and to deliver the information that's needed. Whereas for the men, a lot of time, again, in a general sense, it's not necessarily always about one-upsmanship, but it's about tapping into, for lack of a better word, bear with me, you guys, we're not going to be touchy-feely, but it's really tapping into the feminine power and being able to connect more with the audience.
I haven't thought of it as the feminine power, so I'm going to give that some thought.
Okay.
I think of it as being simple.
Okay.
And just getting simple and being out of your own way. And there are lots of things you can do physically as well, not just intellectually. It's a lot of physical things come into play with this.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So this is a perfect segue. We're going to be back, you guys. We have to take a break for station identification. When we come back, we're going to talk about the things that we can do physically, not just intellectually, to make sure that we are not only our most authentic selves, but that we are also connecting with our audience, and that we are using our leadership charisma to make the kind of impact that we want to make to the people around us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's show? Would you like to share your testimony or any constructive critiques? Would you like to know how to be a guest on The Simone Edwards Show? Please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. We are also available on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Be sure to follow us to receive updates regarding the show and our other ministries.
All right, we are back here in studio with author and leadership consultant and executive coach, Cynthia Burnham, of the book, The Charisma Edge, or How-To Guide for Turning on Your Leadership Power. And so when we last left off, we were talking about how to connect with the audience and to use our leadership charisma to make sure that we are having a positive impact. So if you're a woman, intellectually, it's not about pulling back, but it's about owning your power and speaking clearly. And that if you're a man, it is about becoming a little bit more simple, and that is not about one-upsmanship and trying to compete with the person in the room. So now one of the things that you mentioned before we went to break was it's not just in the intellect, but there are some things physically that we can do. What are some of those things?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a short story to get into this. And by the way,
Absolutely.
I'll make one note. I see men who pull back as well.
Okay.
There are men, especially in a public speaking type of forum, there are a lot of men who will pull back as well. So that stepping forward into your power is for everybody.
That's
right?
good.
Okay. So when I was a little girl, I used to go horseback riding. And I went horseback riding way out in Rancho San Diego, which was a rancho when I was a little kid. And I didn't have a horse. We didn't have that, but I had a friend. And the horse would occasionally run back to the barn and be out of my control. Her name was Ginger. And I would be like 80 or 90 pounds a girl, 900 pounds a horse. I'm pulling on the reins. The horse is taking off. She's gone, right? She wins.
Right.
And I one time went back to the barn, and my friend's father was there. His name was Mr. Sears. And I said, how do I control this horse? And he laughed at me. And he said, Cindy, never make the mistake of thinking you ever control any horse. The best you can do is trick the horse into thinking that you're in charge. So she goes where you want her to go. Okay, so good advice, right?
Right.
Horseback riding. The reason that I bring that up is it turns out that the same thing is true for us with our body, and the part that is driven by the lower parts of our brain, the more physical parts of our brain, and our intellect, which is much more like the rider on the horse. We think we're in charge, but actually it's the body that is in charge more of the time, because the body's there to protect us.
Right.
It reacts more quickly. It's faster. It has more primitive responses that get us. It's like, the way to think about it is if you were about to step into the street and all of a sudden you find yourself jumping backwards, and then you look over down the road and you say, oh, a taxi cab or Uber car, whatever. The distance between your jumping back and your naming it is the distance between the body reacting, the horse, Ginger, and the intellect responding.
That's good.
So the thing to keep in mind, neurologically, the body always reacts first. Not only that, but the body reacts by sending hormones into your system that change the way that you feel. Adrenaline makes you move more quickly. Cortisol is a stress hormone. There are lots of things that happen in your body that make you react. The problem is they also make you feel and think differently.
Interesting. How so?
Okay, so there was a study that was done by a wonderful woman named Amy Cuddy a couple of years ago, where she put people in what she called power poses, and they were like the Wonder Woman pose, hands on the hip, standing up, or feet up on the desk. And then she did mouse swabs where she checked hormonal levels. And she found that for both men and women, 2 minutes in a powerful body pose, the body said, oh, everything's okay. It put power hormones into the system.
Interesting.
Which was testosterone went up, and cortisol, which is stress, went down. So by changing the way that they sat and stood, different hormones appeared in their body.
Interesting.
Okay. The reason why that's important,
Right.
the connection, is that not because they had these hormones floating around in their body, but how did they feel when they had those hormones?
Right.
So men and women both have testosterone. Testosterone is the power hormone. It makes you
Right.
feel powerful, confident, in control, all of those things.
Right.
So testosterone goes up, cortisol, which makes you feel stress, goes down. They felt more powerful, more in control, more confident, and calmer.
Interesting.
Because the body, you think with your body. It's a concept called embodied cognition.
Right.
We think with our intellects. We only are capable of like 5 or 6 thoughts in our intellect at any given time. But the other parts of our brain, the horse part of our brain, is dealing with millions of things all at once.
Interesting.
So if we act as if on a number of different levels, then our body will make us feel those things. If we stand up straight. Nobody here, nobody's mother ever told them to stand up straight. Right? I used to get a little knuckle in my back from my grandmother. Stand up straight, stand up straight. So if you stand up straight, if you breathe more fully, if you think about how you gesture and move in a more powerful way, there's this weird feedback loop. If you fake a smile, the muscles for smiling cause your brain to release endorphins and serotonin, which are pleasure and happiness hormones, and it will turn into a real smile and you'll feel better.
Wow.
I mean, there's weird things that when you look, there's a list of these things.
Right.
Good and bad. If you sit people in chairs that are wobbly, they are statistically more likely to describe their relationships as wobbly.
Interesting.
And shaky. There are many studies on this topic, but it basically says if you pay attention to what your body is doing and you act in your body like a charismatic person or like a powerful person,
Right.
your body will then assist you, and the brain never questions. It doesn't say, why do I feel more powerful and in control? That's really weird. It just says, oh, isn't that great?
Right.
So that feedback loop will make you feel more powerful just by doing those simple things.
So talk to us. I absolutely love that. That is so fascinating. So now, does that tie in also to neuro-linguistic programming?
To a certain extent, it does, yes.
Okay.
Because neuro-linguistic programming, which I don't have a huge expertise in, but and certainly in neurology, if we pay attention and consciously be aware of how we are managing our body and the choices that we're making in the interactions with our body, it creates all sorts of positive or negative feedback loops. Because if you go into your listeners can't see me crunching down in this chair here, but if you go into a submissive kind of a pose, then your body will tell you that there's danger.
Right.
And then you will feel more afraid.
It's almost like a standing fetal position.
Yes.
Okay.
I see people, I could demonstrate for it, but I see people when I'm doing presentation coaching, people who put their hands in front of them, or they grab, they cross their arms, or they cross their legs. And I also have lots of other theories why people do that. But what happens is instead of making them feel more comfortable, it in some ways makes them feel less comfortable because they back into themselves.
Okay.
So when I ask people to stand bigger and to speak louder, because a lot of people, when they get nervous, their voices drop down. They start talking like this, these little tiny voices. And I say, no, speak louder to get around it. Don't speak softer.
Right.
When you become afraid, say to yourself, I'm going to be bigger. Instead of being smaller, I'm going to choose to be bigger. And your body will help you respond in that way.
I love that. So now here's what I want you to tap into for me, because your presentation on this is absolutely fascinating to me. Seriously, it is absolutely fascinating. So talk to us about fake it until you make it, and why it is, if misapplied or if not properly used, why it's dangerous.
This is so important. Fake it till you make it works.
Okay.
If you act as if you act in your body the way that you want to be seen, if you look in the mirror and you say, oh, I'm going to stand up straight, I'm going to hold my head this way, I'm going to look people in the eye, I'm going to do all of these sorts of things, your body will say, yes, you are a powerful person, and it will generate those hormones that cause you to feel that way. The problem is, if you don't be thoughtful about how you want to show up in the world, if you don't make choices, what'll happen is that you will act as if. How you act will make you feel a certain way. Because of this weird feedback loop, how you feel will make you think of yourself in a certain way, and as you think will determine who you become. So I tell people, absolutely fake it till you make it, but choose what you're faking.
Right.
Because you'll become it eventually.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is the recognition that if it makes you feel inauthentic, it's not really relevant.
Right.
If you know it's the right thing to do, inauthenticity is just your brain's way to try to keep you from doing something it thinks is dangerous.
Right.
So really, yes, fake it. But know yourself. Do the work to say, how do I want to show up in the world? How do I want people to think of me?
Honestly, Cindy, that is the best presentation on, because I'll tell the listeners and I'll tell you, I've heard that for so many years, and I've just kind of like turned my nose up to it, like, whatever, because I saw what you just described, which is the lack of thought into how you want to present yourself. And so you see somebody who's, faking it until they make it, and you kind of see the negative side of that. Right. So I didn't see a side of it that necessarily worked in a way that I was like, oh, I would like to emulate that, or, oh, that's something that works, let me do that. But to present it from the standpoint of, if I tell my body, if I'm in a situation where I may feel weak or powerless, and if I tell myself, no, I'm strong and I'm powerful and I'm able to do this, and I communicate that, and I'm going in with, I'm able to do this because I want to make a difference. I'm able to do this because I want to positively impact people. Yes. I'm able to do this because I want to be used for the cause of Christ. I'm able to do this because I want to see people's lives change for the better.
Yes.
Then even if I don't necessarily feel it in that moment, if I continue to tell myself that I'll become it, yes. It's just what's motivating the fake it until you make it.
Yes.
I love your presentation. That is so amazing. You guys, seriously, you have to get this book. We need to take, Antonia is signaling me. And so there's a lot of signaling going on here in the studio. We have to take a break for station identification. Can they find your book on Amazon?
Yes.
So go to www.amazon.com. It is The Charisma Edge. It is by Cynthia Burnham. It's spelled just like it sounds, Burn and Ham. So look up Cynthia Burnham and get The Charisma Edge. I promise you will not be disappointed. And one of the things that I just want to give a plug for the book, because I really, truly enjoy this book and what you have to say, is I like the fact that it is one of the first self-help books that I've read in a while where the author from the onset says, you don't have to do everything, and you don't have to do it perfectly. Do what works for you. I'm going to give you 9 weeks in a day to become more charismatic, but if it takes you longer, it's okay if it takes you longer. And so there really isn't a quick fix. There isn't this magic pill that if you do this, it's start where you are the weakest and yes. where you feel that you need the most help. Get stronger, get bigger.
Do one thing.
Do one thing. And then once you have mastered that, and this is one of the things that you stated in it that I really liked, is once you have mastered it, once it become effortless and second nature to you, then move on to the next thing. So if it takes you 9 weeks in a day, it takes you 9 weeks in a day. If it takes you 9 years and a month, then it takes you 9 years and a month. But the bottom line is practice, is learn and practice, learn and practice, learn and practice. And with each step that you master, you really will become more powerful in the area where you need to become more powerful.
And forgive yourself in the process.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So we have to take a break for station identification. We'll be back in just a moment. Hang tight.
Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's show? Would you like to share your testimony or any constructive critiques? Would you like to know how to be a guest on The Simone Edwards Show? Please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. We are also available on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Be sure to follow us to receive updates regarding the show and our other ministries.
All right, we are back here in studio with Cynthia Burnham, author of The Charisma Edge, a how-to guide for turning on your leadership power. You can find her book at www.amazon.com. Again, that is The Charisma Edge, a how-to guide for turning on your leadership power. She is available for leadership consulting, not only for companies, for business owners that we have out there. She's also available for one-on-one coaching. So for any entrepreneurs that just kind of want someone to come in and say, how am I presenting myself? Am I presenting myself in a way that's actually going to be valuable to my clients and to get the message across? Am I doing that the right way? And even for pastors and ministers out there, that if you want someone to come in and talk to your leaders about how to marry spiritual principles and godly principles with how to take your leadership skills to that next level, she is available. So definitely reach out to her. You can reach her here at the Simone Edwards Show, or they can reach you how?
The easiest way is to connect through my website or through my email, which would be Cindy, CINDY, at CynthiaBurnham.com.
Excellent. So now let's get into the 9 levers of charisma. What are the 9 levers of charisma?
So that's when I started looking at the question of charisma and how to be seen as a more powerful person. I looked at what makes the difference in what other people get from you. How do you be charismatic?
Right.
And I'm very practical. I talk about neuroscience and all this, but really it's always in the service of what are the practical things. And I said, well, really, there's a whole list of things that you can change that are not that hard to change.
Right.
And in my book, I explain them in a certain way. But the first is your posture, your bearing. How do you carry yourself? How do you sit? And how do you stand?
Right.
The second one is, how do you appear to others within whatever tribe you're in? What do you wear? How do you wear your hair? How do you display yourself that says, I'm part of this tribe or part of another tribe? That's the anthropology coming back again.
I absolutely love that.
The other is, what do you do with your gestures? When is it appropriate to have bigger or smaller gestures?
Okay.
How do you use physical touch to connect with people?
Okay.
Some places it's appropriate to hug, some places it's not. Handshakes or any of that kind of thing. And in the book, because this was basically a business book, I talk about handshakes because they're so important in the business world. It's one of the few ways you can touch each other. 2 things that I'm incredibly, since I wrote the book, I would probably have refocused the book slightly and spent more time talking about both voice and the use of your voice, and also the way that you articulate and speak and the way that you choose words, because it changes completely how people hear you. For example, if you had me on here and you said, I'm introducing Cynthia Burnham, the author of The Charisma Edge, blah, 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 and I said, hi, I'm Cindy Burnham. I'm here to talk to you about charisma. You'd be like, Simone has lost her mind. So the ways in which you use your voice and your speech are so powerful. And so those are 2 things. The others that I speak of are the hardest ones are, how do you manage your nerves and your adrenaline? And then how do you make choices about your identity so that you show up as the best version of yourself that you possibly can?
So let's pause on that a little bit and explore those just a little bit more. So the first one is controlling the voice. especially in a time of nerves.
Yes. Well, the first is controlling your posture and your breathing, which goes
Okay.
along with that. And then, and then I would say your voice, yes.
So how do you do that?
Well, first of all, for most of us, it means speaking in a lower pitch than we normally speak. So we're not speaking way up here in this little tiny voice. We're speaking down here in a lower voice. Sounds more powerful. And in those weird studies that they do, they find that people who speak in a lower, more powerful voice do better on tests, are perceived by other people as being more powerful, and feel more powerful themselves by changing their voice. I know it's crazy, but there it is. The other thing that doesn't, side note, that doesn't mean there's a lot of young women and young men right now. The style is to go into something called vocal fry, and they go down into the Kim Kardashian kind of voice. They talk down here, and I'm so bored. And that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm not talking about that voice. And so speaking in a lower, more powerful voice, and you can find that by doing what I call a hum down, and I'm going to back away from the mic just a second.
Okay.
And we talked about the sea level.
Right.
I talk about that as being the lowest point where you're free floating, but you're as low as you can get with your head above water.
Right.
Right. So what I tell people to do is do this. And when you hear that growly part, that means you've gone too far.
Okay.
So what you do is you imagine that you've gone down underwater all the way.
Right.
But you let yourself bounce up a little bit. So you're, instead of speaking down here like this, which is the evil mom voice, Cynthia Burnham. You know you're in trouble, right? Okay. It's true.
It's funny because we were just talking about
that. All right. You let that voice bounce just a slight bit up, so you're speaking in this kind of a part of your voice, and you come across as more powerful, and it also settles you. It helps settle you.
Okay.
The other part of your voice is when we become adrenalized, we tend to speak too quickly. Because the adrenaline is spinning us. So to always be thoughtful and pull back on the pacing, and if you're nervous, you're probably going to be okay.
Right.
You think, I see this all the time. You think you're speaking in a very normal voice, but you're actually talking really fast like this, and you're going really because your adrenaline is stirring you up. But that stir also causes your body to get overwrought, so you continue it. So all of these things are counterintuitive.
Right.
If you're nervous and your voice gets soft, speak louder.
Right.
If you feel like you're going along fine, slow down. All of those, they're kind of counterintuitive, but it's a way of managing that horse, if you want to look at it.
And you mentioned something about telling yourself to be still.
To be still.
Just
be still, be still, be still, be still.
Right. So if you find yourself, you're about to be introduced and you're standing off stage and you're in the wings and you can look out and you can see the audience and you hear the person saying, and now Cynthia is going to come to the stage and she's going to present. In that moment where you're, oh my God, be still. Just, and it's just a simple command of telling your body, no, shh.
Yeah, and there are two other things you can do besides the be still.
Okay.
One is to recognize that many times when we become adrenalized, we're excited.
Okay.
But we name it fear.
That's beautiful.
We name it fear. And if you're standing off stage, my heart will beat and I'll say, oh, look at you, big shot. You're supposed to be the one that's not nervous. And then I'll say, no, I'm just so excited to be here. And if I can hold on to that part, that's helpful for me.
Right.
And the other part is to have a phrase that you use as your intention as you walk into those situations. Mine is, and I can say this on this kind of a program, mine is, I am now in service.
Right.
I am now in service. So if I'm about to speak, before I came into this show, before I go into any coaching, I say to myself, I am now in service. And that,
I love that.
Helps me pull back and reminds me that my job is to be here and not worrying about the heart beating. You can't see me patting my chest as my heart is beating hard. So, yes.
But I love that, though, because what it does is it takes fear and it takes something that's really big and it redirects it.
Yes.
And it says, no, I'm not going to operate from a place of being afraid. I'm going to take what I feel, channel it now to excitement, and then I'm going to speak my intention.
Yes.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Okay, so now you had talked about articulation.
Articulation.
Oh, and I want you to touch on that because that is so vital and it's so important. And we live in a time where most of the people that are before us on a regular basis, and this spans the realm of artists to politicians, are not always articulate, are not always genteel in their speech. Why is articulation so very important, even if you're in a setting where people are not articulate or they're not genteel?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are two questions in there. The first has to do with gentility and civility, which I do not think ever goes out of style.
Yes, I agree.
And I think that people who become ungenteel are using a different kind of a power, and I simply I don't approve of it.
Right.
So that's one thing. As far as articulation is concerned, and speaking with the correct words in voices that can be understood, there are two pieces of that for me. One is anthropological, back to that again, and one is respect.
Okay.
The anthropological piece is that we have certain prejudices about speech.
Right.
And if you think of a British accent and you hear a British accent and you hear somebody speaking, you think, oh, they sound really smart, they sound educated, they sound so... Now, they may be a complete idiot.
Right.
But we hear that and we pre-prejudice ourselves from that. So I say, think about how a good British person uses articulation, or even many good pastors and ministers have that beautiful articulation, and they may not be saying anything that's smart. No offense, there are some pastors who are much better than others, but when they speak so beautifully, we listen to them.
Right.
So the beauty of the language comes through more powerfully, and we have prejudices about articulation, no matter where we're from.
Right.
British people think all Americans sound stupid. Because we don't articulate our words. And for me, part of that means things like putting the T's and S's and things on the ends of words.
Right. Or the G's on the coming.
Yeah, coming. Or,
Antonio's making faces for those of you who cannot see us in the studio.
So that's part of it. The respect piece of it has to do with the fact we are in an increasingly culturally diverse world.
That is such a good point.
People come from ethnic backgrounds, different countries, different parts of the world, and they don't all speak English as a first language, and they don't all speak the same English as a first language.
Right.
So if you get in the habit of speaking clearly, precisely, with a good pace, and being careful about the way that you speak, you're much more likely to have more people be able to understand you and hear you.
That is such an excellent point, and I'll give a story to back that up. Walks into the neighborhood gas station, and individual walks in, the guy standing behind the counter, and the person says, "I haven't seen you in a minute." He is from another culture, and his response is, "Were you here earlier?" Because in his mind, "I haven't seen you in a minute" is literally, "I have not seen you in 60 seconds.
Right.
Whereas the person was saying, "I haven't seen you in a while. I haven't been here in a while. How are you? What's going on?" And it was misinterpreted.
Yes.
And so it ties so beautifully into what you were saying about ethnicity. And if we can find that middle ground, if we can find that place where, not for our own benefit, but because we are in service, if we can find that middle ground of, this is how I'm going to speak, because this is the middle road that connects to more people, the road branches out to connect to more people than if I just kind of bottleneck myself into this one particular place.
Yes.
It gives me...
If you want to.
Right.
Because some people make a choice to be a representative of a certain cultural outlook, whatever that is. I mean, there are millions of them. If that's what you want, then the question is not what are you doing, what are you sacrificing, and what are you choosing. So it's all about making a conscious choice, I think. And that's
beautiful. That's actually a really good point. And so it gives us something to consider. It's do you want to reach just one particular subset, or do you want to reach more people? And if you want to reach more people, then you're going to have to find that middle ground. If you only want to reach a certain subset, then you can remain, in that linguistical pattern and as focused as you want to be, whether that's, a Southern drawl or a British accent.
Yes.
Right.
The same is true as clothes, by the way.
Yes. So, can you touch on the other 7 levers? We are over by 1 minute, but I want people to know what's in your book because they need to get this book. It's amazing.
Well, many of the things have to do with things like articulation, but it's also how do you stand? How do you shake people's hands? How do you make good, positive eye contact with people, which is a cultural phenomenon. It is not hardwired. And really, the book is about what are practical. There are 101 tips, all in little paragraphs that say, do this, do this, do this, and all of the various things. But from my standpoint, it's about how do I make conscious choices about the way that I use this vehicle that I am inhabiting in this beautiful world? How do I use my body? How do I use the language? How do I use the way I think about myself to be the most powerful, to be the most clear, to be my deepest and most authentic self? And that's really what this is all in service for.
I absolutely love that. One of the tips that I would like for you to throw out before we close out the show is talk to the person who has a difficult time making eye contact. So if they come from a environment where they were not allowed to make eye contact, or a culture where they were not allowed to do that, and now they find themselves in a business setting or in a community setting where making eye contact is part of the culture and it's seen as strength, how do they overcome that hurdle?
So I have several tips on this. They're not all in my book.
Okay.
So the first is the real sneaky technique is that you look right at the bridge of someone's nose.
Okay.
Okay, that's an actor's technique. If you're uncomfortable with eye contact, you look between a person's eyes.
Right.
They think you're making eye contact. You're not actually doing it.
Okay.
I also suggest to people that part of the reason that you feel uncomfortable with eye contact is you don't know how long you're supposed to hold it.
Okay.
And so that makes us feel uncomfortable.
Right.
What I tell people is you should feel it long enough so you can feel that click. You feel kind of like, ooh, I'm connected with that person. And that you can note their eye color. You don't have to remember their eye color. And so I just have to know, oh, brown. Okay. And then I can move on to another person. Don't worry about looking away. Everyone looks away when they think.
Yes.
Okay, that's a hardwired thing. If you're uncomfortable because you were raised in a society or a culture, for example, where you're taught by your parents, don't you stare at me with those beady little eyes when I'm talking at you, which there are a lot of cultures that operate that way,
right?
As opposed to mine, which was you look at me when I'm talking to you. So it depends on how you were raised.
Right.
The other thing is to remember that your job is to connect.
Right.
And the eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So the final thing that I do, you may like this, is that when I find myself drifting in eye contact or in focus with the people that I'm talking to, I send them blessings.
Okay.
I just say, I'm sending you blessings, and it brings me back to where I'm supposed to be. And then I don't mind the eye contact.
So then it's a mental thought, not necessarily something you vocally articulate.
No. I haven't yet, but no, it's something for me to remind me that my job reminds me of my job, and then the eye contact isn't painful.
That's wonderful. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for the tip. I hope that you have thoroughly enjoyed this interview with author, leadership consultant, and executive coach Cynthia Burnham. You can find her book, The Charisma Edge, at www.amazon.com. You can also email her if you'd like to use her as a speaker at that is Cindy at cynthiaburnham.com, and it's the same for your website.
My website is cynthiaburnham.com. Yes.
cynthiaburnham.com. So, and if you have any questions, if you've forgotten any of that stuff, you can reach out to us here at the Simone Edwards Show, and we will definitely connect you with her.
And I also have a Facebook page, the Charisma Edge Facebook page, where I post tips.
Excellent. Excellent. So that's a great way to connect with her also. So you have email, you have website, and you have social media, and you have us here at the Simone Edwards Show. So we have come to the close of the show. We're over by about 5 minutes, but we just had to get tips from this amazing lady. If you are here in the San Diego area, tomorrow is Easter Sunday, and it is Resurrection Sunday. If you are here in the San Diego area and you do not have a church home and you would like to find a place to worship on Sunday morning, come join us at Perfecting Grace. Our address is 3142 East Plaza Boulevard, National City, California 91950. You can find us on Facebook at Perfecting Grace. You can find us on the web at www.perfectinggrace.net. Come on out. We start at 9 a.m. We'll be done by about 10:30, 10:45, and you have the rest of this beautiful Sunday, that will be tomorrow, to go to the beach or eat some ham and turkey or do whatever it is you plan to do. But come on out and celebrate the resurrection with us. Until next week, have a fabulous rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon.